Picture, if you will, the snug seclusion of a candle-lit study at Gaylord College, Oxbridge, on a stormy night in late December, almost 100 years ago, where Oxbridge academic and confirmed bachelor, the Reverend Professor Dr. Montgomery Mablethorpe Zoomer, is seated on a Chesterfield wingback chair before a roaring log fire to share the ritual of ghost stories over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop with his coterie of young, fresh-faced student acolytes. Setting aside his cup of steaming punch, he opens the dusty tome that rests upon his knees and begins to read in a mellifluous voice.
The Queer Fellow in the Upper Bunk by J.R. Dullard. A Victorian ghost story of sorts in the oral tradition as read by Sir Christopher Lurch.
The tale I am about to relate is one that came into my personal possession by quite the most curious of circumstances. How so, I hear you ask? Listen closely, and all will be revealed. During college recess in the summer of 1913, I had been engaged to embark upon a lecture tour of North America, and, to this end, had booked passage on the SS Gigantic bound for New York. Upon being shown to my stateroom, I was somewhat alarmed to find I would be sharing it with another gentleman who was not known to me. I took the lower bunk as his portmanteau, greatcoat and rug were already placed on the upper berth, marking his territory, one presumed, though my unwelcome companion was, as yet, nowhere to be seen. The ship left Liverpool dock at the appointed hour, and I took to the deck, taking in the sea air as I mingled with the assembled throng waving their goodbyes to old England. And I wondered whether the strange bedfellow who seemed destined to share my chamber for the duration was among their number. Eventually my fellow passengers dispersed to prepare for dinner and the evening's entertainment, and I returned damper but no wiser to my shared cabin. I was to discover, upon returning to my stateroom, however, that I may have well passed him on the stairs on my way to the upper deck, for a tremendous fellow in his 30s knelt below the open porthole, rocking backwards and forwards and engaged in fervent prayer as he fingered the rosary that was clasped betwixt his large, prayerful hands. He was an imposing figure who bore the likeness of a bare-knuckle boxer. Below a head of thick black hair and monobrow, his nose was flat, but not unattractive, his cleft chin powerful, and his physique hulking. I confess I was impressed to see his religious convictions. I coughed, deliberately, to attract his attention, and was successful in that endeavour. He swung his head around to greet me, and in that moment I was met by a smile of such dazzling brilliance that it fairly took my breath away, even as I envied his dental practitioner. He introduced himself in a deep baritone. "William Aloysius Turt, at your service," he announced by way of a greeting. "But my friends call me Willie," he added with a wink. Introductions and pleasantries exchanged, my first impressions were of a gay, good-natured fellow who was likely to be jolly company. At this, my anxiety was quelled, for the time being at least. We dined together that first evening. Willie did indeed prove to be convivial company in every way, and my roommate and I quickly fell into a comfortable familiarity. After dinner, we retired to the games room, designated for the sole enjoyment of gentlemen such as we, and played a hand or two of Snap and Happy Families, before taking a last turn around deck and then retiring to our cabin for a nightcap of brandy and cigars. It was not long, however, before I was forced to admit that the sea air had quite worn me out, and, having pitched our cigar stubs out of the open porthole, and stretching and yawning, we both retired for the night to the comfort of our separate bunks. I read briefly, but, having once extinguished my reading lantern, was quickly overcome by sleep, falling deeply into its welcoming arms. I awoke with a start just as quickly some time later, however, when I felt a presence slip under the sheets alongside me in the bed. It was William Aloysius Turt, and he was trembling. "Pray forgive the intrusion," he whined, "but I suffer from night terrors and could do with the company." "Good God, man," I replied, "are your feet always this cold?" "They'll soon warm up," he apologized meekly. "But why? Why do you tremble so?" "'Tis my affliction, sir," he blubbered, "ever since—" And here he began to share his hideous tale of woe. "I earn my living as a professional athlete and antiquarian," he began. "An odd combination, you might think, but it sits well with me. And it had been my custom to indulge both interests by investing such free time as I am allowed in the spa town of Bath, taking the waters and perusing its many curiosity shops. It is in Bath that I sought to maintain my youthful vigour by way of the mineral deposits served up by the locals, cleansing, detoxifying and relaxing my body at leisure, and at length I was often to be found in the Ganymede bathhouse, a combination of spa and Turkish hammam. It offered me welcome respite from the madding crowd and filthy streets without. In that all-male environment, the activities enjoyed kept both body and mind clean and pure. Thus revived, I was wont to meander up its back alleys into the antiquarian bookshops that proliferate there, and be assured, I leave no nook or cranny unexplored once I am rejuvenated. It was a dank and dismal afternoon when I first entered one of my favourite and frequent haunts. Pam's Labyrinth was the establishment in question. Tucked discreetly up a back passage I knew only too intimately, and having shaken the rain from my umbrella, I entered into its quietude and began to venture my way through the well-stocked if dusty shelves. Set back behind the counter hung two heavy curtains in faded green velvet, repurposed, I should imagine, from a very grand house clearance, and from between its moth-eaten folds emerged what at first sight looked like a troll, but was in fact the proprietress, one Pamela Elizabeth Dowdy, with whom I had previously been acquainted. She was a petite, plump woman of indeterminate age and very little hair. She peered at me over her half-moon spectacles and asked, by way of greeting, what she could do for me this time. I inquired hopefully if she had anything special secreted away for the discerning collector, at which prompting she advised me that if I was seeking yet more photographic examples of Greek love, then I was to be sorely disappointed, as I had cleared out all of her voluminous stock on my last visit. However, my crestfallen expression must have inspired her to take pity, as she reached down and produced from under the counter a yellowing manuscript tied up with a blood-red ribbon. "'Tis the memoir of the infamous rake Sir Hugo Eugenus," she grunted in disgust. "The one who died in disgrace in a debtor's prison at the hands of a person or persons unknown?" I inquired. "The very same," she replied, her thin lips twisted in a malevolent smirk. "Unpublished?" I further inquired. "Ah," she grimaced, "'twas considered too scandalous for publication by all accounts." A price was quickly agreed, and, tucking the now plain-wrapped package under my arm, I hastened back to the privacy of my lodgings for a lengthy ferret. Reaching said lodgings, I scampered up the stairs two at a time, hurriedly locked my boudoir door, stuffed my meerschaum pipe with premium shag tobacco, and settled myself at my desk to read. I inhaled the rich aroma of coconut-infused tobacco fumes as my fingers pulled loose the ribbon that bound the manuscript, and, I admit, I shivered in anticipation at the prospect of reading this forbidden tome. I deftly turned the title page and read, "Whomever should read this manuscript is doomed. Doomed, I tell you. Doomed. For you will forevermore be pursued until welcome death takes you into its ample bosom." Of course, I scoffed, being a man of the physical world, and not of a spiritual inclination. That conversion was to come later. Yet, as I continued to read, I grew increasingly disturbed by the steaming pile of unmitigated filth that lay before me and seared its way into my very consciousness. Like an opium addict, I could not be satisfied with small doses, and so was compelled to carry on through the long evening and even longer night until the reading of it was complete. The first rays of morning light had broken through the curtains before, sated and, in what can only be described as a feverish state, I discarded my sweat-sodden attire and fell, naked and dripping, into bed. But there was to be no rest, not from that day to this. Janus pursues me through my dreams. I have no rest, no peace, no relief. Turt gripped onto me even tighter, like a drowning man seeking a saviour. I sniffed the air suspiciously as suddenly I became aware of a rank, festering odour in the room, the mouldering smell of death. And with it came the terrible awareness of a third body in the bed alongside us. It was a tight fit, to say the least. A cold, slimy, hideous figure had joined us, whose demonic eyes shone red as flame in the darkness, even as it thrust a second pair of ice-cold trotters onto our own. My natural curly hair began to straighten and stood erect on my scalp. I opened my mouth to scream for fear, but found I had no voice. "There is no escape," cried Turt. "I thought if I put distance between me and Bath, I might find freedom. But there is no escape, no escape." And with that, he sprang to his feet with a single leap and made a bolt for the open porthole. To this day, I have no idea how he managed to force his hulking frame through that tiny porthole. My head still rings, however, with his agonized screams and the sound of squelching. For my part, coward that I am, I clamped my eyes tight shut and collapsed into unconsciousness. Blessed unconsciousness. When I awoke, dawn's early light was streaming through the blood-smeared porthole, and I was alone. Nor was there a trace of the malodorous smell of the night before. I reported the matter to the captain and, though fearful of being considered the prime suspect, once he had examined my nightshirt and everything that lay underneath it, thoroughly satisfying himself as to my innocence in the process, he instigated an exhaustive search of the ship. Despite strenuous and prolonged effort, no trace of my companion was ever found, nor evidence of the actual third party, thankfully. On the plus side, I was able to enjoy the rest of my journey in solitude.